I'm just like freaking out a little bit because of all this traffic and all the noise and all the busyness on the street.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video, and make sure you leave a comment. I have a very, very special guest on today. Good friend of mine, a guy that I spent some time with. We were in the special housing unit. We played some wall ball. We did a bunch of, talking. But you know what? I'm going to let John tell his story. John, tell the people who you are, where you're from, and talk a little bit about you and how you ended up in prison.
My name is John Powers. People call me Jack. And ended up in prison because I was an idiot. I went out. I guess I watched too many movies, thought that I could get ahead in life by robbing banks, being a criminal, taking shortcuts. So, I went out and robbed some banks. I got caught. Then I made my second biggest mistake, was thinking that I could actually fight the feds and win. So, I put up a hell of a fight all the way through. And in the end, I lost. I won some of the wars, but lost the battle. So, I ended up with a lengthy sentence of 42 plus years altogether, and sent into the federal prison system, federal penitentiaries. I started at Leavenworth, 1990.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How old were you, John, when you first got arrested?
I was 26 when I first got arrested.
26 years old, and you end up with a 42-year sentence. What did that feel like inside, man?
It was crushing. I mean, it was, I didn't know that the feds had passed all of those laws under the Sentence Reform Act of, 1984, I guess it was, when we first came up with all those changes. But I didn't know that people got that kind of time for those types of offenses. It was pretty harsh, but I mean, the harsher part was me realizing what I had done to my family, what I had done to my friends, what I had done to myself, my own life. I think that was the more pointed part of the whole thing, was me realizing how badly I had screwed up.
And you go to Leavenworth. Eventually you get transferred somewhere else. I know you were in Atlanta. During your prison experience, eventually you end up serving, I think, 22 years in solitary confinement. But, while you were in that prison system, did you ever witness violence, John?
All the time. All the time. As you say again and again on your show, the federal system, all the penitentiaries and even the state prisons, are way out of control. I mean, back when I first went in, it was a little bit different story, because back then you had programs, there was a little more freedom inside. And I think that freedom was, personally, I think it was necessary, because it kept prisoners from turning on each other. And, you still had the same old things going on, but there just wasn't nearly as much violence statistically as there is now. Now it's just completely off the charts. So back then it was, I went into Leavenworth in 1990, coming out of the county jail in Hillsborough County, Florida. It was like being released into a low-income housing project. And I remember, my first day there, I went to the chow hall, and it was hamburger day. And people were there was a big salad bar, there was good food. You had to find a place to sit in the right area and all that stuff. But the gist of it was that it was was more relaxed. There wasn't all that tension and stress and hatred and fear that there is now. I think, the combination of the Sentence Reform Act and those very draconian sentences, and then the fact that the Bureau of Prisons started tightening screws and taking everything away from everyone. All the programs went out. They just tightened down on everything until there was nothing left except the hatred, the fear, the violence. So it's pretty bad.
The one thing that I really want to talk about, right? I mean, we've both seen a lot of violence. You went through some things in life, and we all have, but you went through some extreme things. And, me and you eventually, we became pretty good friends. You don't always meet friends in federal prison, but me and you became close. I know there were times where, I'd go in the rec cage with you, and sometimes the cops were like, in the beginning, like, you want to go in there with him? And I'm like, yeah, that's my homeboy. I'm going in there. He's from my area. Yeah, that's my buddy. But you had spent all that time in the ADX. Do you want to talk about how that happened, how you ended up there?
Yeah, I escaped from federal prison in FCI in New Jersey in 1999. And I think that there's, as well as I do, Chad, it's like, there's two things that are really frowned upon in the federal system: killing a correctional officer and escape from a secure prison. So, I think in some instances, particularly mine, I think it's possible that the escape was, it's right up there on par with one of the worst things that could happen to the Bureau of Prisons because of the embarrassment of it. So when they got me back in custody, they just went ahead and knocked me out and gave me more time. You know how it goes. You lose all your property, whatever you have going from one place to another. I was in Lewisburg, in the basement over there, in the old Lewisburg basement. Again, in solitary confinement down there while I was going to trial. And, it was a mess. And when my trial was over, they sent me right out to ADX immediately to the control unit. So, that was my next landing space.
I want to talk a little bit about that. I want you to turn your volume up on your phone. Is it all the way up?
Yeah, it's up. Let me turn this fan off though, because that might be giving a little bit of interference.
There it is, much better.
If you hear better now.
If you can get a little closer to that phone, yeah, that's perfect. Way better. Thank you. You walked into the ADX, you escaped from prison, they give you more time. When you get to the ADX, how long are you sentenced in the ADX originally?
Well, I was sentenced for 5 years. I had 60 months originally. So I ended up spending almost 13 years.
Let me ask you this, John. When you get the 5 years, do you think, man, you get to the ADX, are you like, I can do the 5 years here, I'm going to be okay? Or are you thinking in your mind like, wow, man, I'm in trouble here. I don't know if I can make it. What is your mindset when you walk into the ADX?
Well, it's one of those feelings where you feel like, I remember the bus pulling up and going through the gates and going around the building and all the security procedures, and then this big garage door opening and the bus pulling in this big dark cave-like enclosure and the door going down. And after a while, this line of staff came out, and the bus was pretty full, and everybody was wondering, like, who is it that's going here? It was FCIers and probably some campers, some penitentiary dudes, but everybody's looking around like, who's getting off here? And so they came in and stood at the front by the door, the gate, and called my name. So I went up, I got up and shuffled to the front, and I turned around and I spoke to the rest of the men. I said, look, I said, good luck to you all. I don't know what's happening with me here, but I wish you all the best of luck. I stepped off the bus to a whole crowd of correctional officers. They had the camera, they had the unit manager, and all these staff members, and they just surrounded me. And we went through a couple more locked doors, and then into the holding cell, and they take the chains off, but they act like you have. First of all, they act like you're not even human, like they're handling some alien from another planet or some other kind of being that's less than human. You can easily sense their attitudes there, and then it's just really disconcerting when you have all those chains on you, and they're reaching through the bars to take the chains off. They can't even leave you outside a cage to take the chains off. They have to put you in a cage so you can take them off. So everything has a serious psychological impact on how you feel about yourself. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
It's designed to destroy people, isn't it?
Yeah. That whole routine there was designed to incapacitate, and they don't make any bones about it. The Bureau of Prisons, they don't say, "Yeah, we're here to affect a temporary punishment for what you did," or "We're here to help re-educate you," or try to get you on a better track, a better path of thinking or acting. They don't make any bones about it. It's all about incapacitation. They want to mess you up to the point where you can't do anything anymore except sit in a cell for 24/7.
John, I didn't experience the things that you experienced, right? But sometimes I do have
some of them. You did quite a bit of them.
Sometimes I do have flashbacks, and I remember when we were down there in Arizona, we were in the hole, and I had spent 14 months down there, and it started to affect me mentally and emotionally. And I can only imagine, how it affected you. And we're going to get into that. And I want to get into that because I want people to understand what this is like. I want this to make people say, you know what? Maybe I better get my shit together so I don't end up in a position where these people can do whatever they want, where they can mentally destroy me or do whatever. How long do you think it took before? And I remember some of our conversations from back then about the TV, where you got to a point where you felt like they were watching you through the TV and you smashed the TV, I think. When do you think it finally hit you where you started to change mentally?
Well, to your first point, let me say that I think it's well taken, because once people that are in this criminal lifestyle, I don't think they understand or realize, at least I didn't, what the consequences could be. You really just don't understand what all this means, what it's about, what can happen, the bad shit that can go down. So, when you expose yourself to the potential of prosecution, you're making a bad mistake. You're just making a bad fucking mistake. I would tell anybody, based on my experience, just don't do it. If you're doing dope, stop. You're giving too much time for that. If you're thinking about hurting somebody, don't do it. Do something else. Forget about that. Just go on. Do something else. This is and has been my thoughts on this for a long time, because, they made a true believer out of me, in the sense that, what I went through was, it was serious business. And, it was like, there were crimes that were being committed against me as a human being that were far in excess light years beyond any crime that I had ever committed. So, I never put anybody in chains. I never held somebody in a 7x12 steel and concrete sarcophagus for fucking 33 years or almost 33 years. I never, treated anyone the way that I was treated in that place for that length of time. So, yeah, the equation just doesn't make sense. To expose yourself to that kind of liability just does not make sense at all for anyone, for any purpose. Just don't do it. And yeah, it took me a little bit of time because when I first got to ADX, it was like all of these doors, right? And they had me surrounded by this crowd food squad. They were all dressed in black and had their helmets, and one of them had a camera, and we're going down this hallway, and the hallway is weird because it's shaped like it's wider at one point and narrower at another, and then it takes a little twist, a little dip, and then it goes down, and then it takes another direction. The whole thing it's constructed in order to confuse you, in order to disorient you, in order to make you lose sense of where you are. And I mean, that's just one of the elements in this whole, this entire playbook of incapacitation techniques. So, they just started putting me through the paces. They put me in the control unit, which is the hole within the hole within the hole. It's other than range 13, it's about as far as you can get as far as being locked down. You can't go much further than that.
Let me ask you this, John. They ever put their hands on you? Ever beat you up?
They did. Yeah. Plenty of time. Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to talk about some of the particulars, right? Because I know that, you were the basis of everything that, happened with that lawsuit at ADX. I believe you were the basis, and, you were the speaker. You spoke up for them people. And I think that there were so many people suffering, and I've done some shows on it, how many people have committed suicide over there. Just the situation that the people were in, it was so they just destroyed you mentally where people just couldn't handle it no more. And, thank God that it didn't send you all the way to that point. But I know that there were points in your life where you did some things, and I was with you when some things happened, and, the biting of the fingers and you bit your fingers off. And, I don't want to upset you or anything, but one of your testicles, I believe you cut out. Your earlobes you cut, your Achilles tendons you cut. You tattooed your body with a razor blade and an ink pen. And, I've read articles about you after, I had gotten out of prison. I looked you up, man. Like, I want to find out what's going on with my buddy. This dude was my buddy. One of the few people I considered as real friends. And I looked you up and I read all this stuff that you did and that you were involved in. What was it like, John, to, it bothers me a little bit, man, to be at the point in your life where you actually bite your fingers off, man? What did it take, John, to push you that far?
It was, the thing about the fingers is, and, there it is. But the thing about the fingers was, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it was grief that caused me to do that, because when you're in prison, you don't have any immediate contact with your family. You might as well be in another part of the world. So my little brother died, and shortly after that, I didn't realize at the time, but shortly after that is when, the first finger came off. And then when I was over there with you in Arizona, my sister died, my older sister. So, and then a little while after that was when that finger came off. So I know that in certain cultures, they will do that to themselves. And I'm just wondering if there isn't something to that. But I think it's just, I think it's the loss of a part of yourself. I think it's a message that I was trying to send to anyone that could look or listen, that I was losing parts of myself through this experience.
You know, I remember the day that you that you came out to the yard, dude. You had your finger in a pill bottle. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, I had it around my neck. I was hurt like
And I was just like, wow, man. Wow. And, you know, we became friends and, you know, do you remember when you used to say, hey, man, you want to go out and play wall ball? And I'm like, what the hell's wall ball? And you had made that ball with the sock. And I was pretty much the only dude that would go in a rec cage with you pretty much. You know what I mean? I think eventually maybe Tommy or Coleslaw might have came in there eventually. And I remember the cop saying, you're going to go in a cell with this dude? Are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, bro, I'm going in the rec cage with him. Why not? And, you know, we ended up becoming friends, man. And I felt for you. I felt your pain to a certain extent, you know? And, you know, we'd go out there and do you remember doing it? Jack, you want to go out and play some wall ball? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be there, Jack. And we had.
How about volleyball?
Yeah. Look, yeah. And you bring the strings out, you tied the strings, and we'd be hitting that ball like we were playing volleyball because we had nothing, man. All we had was a balled up sock. And we were in an enclosure where, you know, it's all gates, steel, metal, concrete. And I want people to realize this, man, that this is how bored we were, that we made a ball out of a sock and we're hitting it over a string as if it was volleyball. And, you know, it was our rec for a while. And then do you remember when they came and told us, oh, right, the lieutenant said you can't do this?
They tried to shut us down. Right?
Yeah. They wanted to take it and you got pissed off. You got super pissed off.
Yeah, I got really pissed but that's what they do. That's what they did in ADX. I had the little basketball rim that I had made, you know, just rolling up paper, making a rim out of it and a backboard, and I had it on the top of the cell.
And you brought one of them out to the rec cage a few times.
Yeah.
You put it up real high. Me and you were over there playing 21.
Yeah, we had a good time.
Yeah.
But the point is, yeah, I mean, you're looking for things to do, and, you know, because the prison officials, apparently, what I got from it is they don't want you to do anything. They must expect that prisoners are just going to sit in a cell 24/7 and twiddle their thumbs. They don't want you to be creative at all. In ADX, every time that they came to do a shakedown, which was anytime I went out to rec or whatever, my basketball and my room would be gone. You know, I got back, so it wasn't abnormal for them to do that.
Let's talk about this, John, because, you know, we ended up getting a handball, and then we were out there playing handball every day, and eventually something happens, right? I mean, you take that battery. I think you made a drill bit out of the battery.
Yeah.
And you drilled a hole in your head. And I remember you coming out the wreck, and the cop tried to pull. You were already drilling a hole in your head. The cop tried to take your do-rag. And you're like, hey, man, what are you doing? They're like, well, you're not going to wreck. You're like, all right, put me back in the cell. And I remember writing you a kite and saying, hey, man, what's going on down there? Are you okay? You know,
Yeah.
I'm checking on you, bro. I want to make sure you're okay. And you're like, yeah, I'm okay. And then I think it was that night when the nurse came, you actually took a piece of your skull out, right? And you put it on the food flap, if I remember correctly. And the nurse was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, they take you out of there, right? They took you to the hospital. And I see you the next day. You come to rec. And you're like, dude, I got a facelift. And they had to tighten your skin. You leave rec. And then the next thing I know, they're coming to get you. And they're like, no, you're leaving. You're like, but what about my property? Like, don't worry about that. You're being transferred today. And that was the last time I had seen you. I want to ask you two questions because I don't know what happened. But what the hell possessed you to do that, man?
Well, there's a kind of an ancient practice. It's called trepanation, and some people would take a piece of their skull out and they alleged that it would help you to realize, it would help you realize higher levels of consciousness. Don't think it really did that for me because, I was cranking away in the cell. I was just like for a couple of days, I would just walk around the cell going, son. And then that one afternoon, I was going, and it went crunch, and the thing just started moving around. And I'm like, oh, man. So I went over by the toilet, and I took it down like this, and I looked, and when I looked, the blood just poured down on my face like a waterfall. And it was like, I was like, yeah, this is it then. I'm just going to, I must have, ruptured an artery or hit something because there's just too much blood here. So I just lay on the floor there for a long time. And then when I heard somebody coming along, I kind of got over by the flap and banged on the door. And I don't remember who it was, but they looked in and they screamed or whatever and ran down and, got the other officers. So
I remember that,
man. I still have a plate in my head. I have a plate in my head right here. Even though it's grown back together, because that grows back after a while.
John, you got a hell of a pain tolerance, don't you?
Well, yeah, I would say it's probably high.
You would have been the last guy in the world I ever would want to fight in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Oh, but
that's a statement right there because you're a fighter, and I mean, you were a genuine badass tough guy. I mean, you were.
We don't want people to know that type of stuff on here, but it's all right. But
you're selling.
We would never.
That was mouthing off to you, but yeah.
Me and you would never ever fight, man. You were my friend. I cared about you.
No.
I still care about you. There's a few things that bother me still, man. And you were one of the things that bothered me when I got out of prison. And once in a while I do have flashbacks. This does affect us mentally and emotionally, and sometimes I do break down. My office is a little bigger than what my cell was like, and it's sad, but when I'm in this office and I'm doing YouTube or I'm doing legal work, you know what? I'm alone, and I'm fine with it, man, and I feel like I'm safe here. I'm in my enclosure, and
yeah.
That's what prison does to you, and it's real, man, and it's raw. And Jack, you suffered, man. You suffered like no one else, man. You've done things to yourself where I believe it was a lot of the suffering. I think it may have been a mix of what you went through with your family, but what you were going through in the ADX. And there were so many men just like you over there, but they didn't go to the extremes. There was one guy, do you remember the one guy, he used to eat batteries in ADX, I think, and he stuck, didn't he stick some tweezers through his belly button or something?
Yeah, he died eventually, but at Springfield. But got a sepsis or some kind of infection. They said, but eventually a lot of those guys do die because, they either inadvertently kill themselves or they just get tired of the whole thing and kill themselves.
Let me ask you this. When you were in there, and there was a bunch of guys there that spent a lot of time there with you at the same time. I think Mark Jordan was over there, Ted Kaczynski. When someone did commit suicide or someone died, did it hurt you? Because eventually you became the speaker for this lawsuit, bro. Did it hurt you when someone died, passed away? Were you like, damn, man?
Well, my little buddy, Jose Vega, we called him Gato, and he was a good-hearted kid. He was right below me, in the cell below me, and, he was always in chains. You know how they put you in chains and leave you in the cell? They'll, ambulatory restraints. They'll have you with a waist chain and the cuffs, the black box, the shackles on your legs, and they leave you in the cell like that. You have to shuffle around inside a locked cell in the control unit. They would do that all the time to him. But he and I became friends. We played a game that I call Conquest that we invented over the sink, just blowing out the drain and yelling our moves back and forth. And, one Saturday morning, he just went off. He threw some, he shit down some of the cops that came to get him for wreck, or when they came into Sally Port, he shit them down. And they took him across to another cell right across the range and put him in there. And he got the belly chain on, slid it down, over his hips or whatever, stepped through it. And he used that belly chain to hang himself on the bars. That was a very traumatic event to have occur. But there were so many traumatic events. It was like a whole litany of them that one just followed the other. So,
I mean, the ADX drives people to feel like, hey, I just had enough. You think he just had enough?
Yeah, people that are sitting there and they're thinking, man, I'm never getting out of prison. Not in reality. I've got too many years, or maybe they have life. They have life, they're never getting out, right? There's no parole. So, but if they have a certain number of years, they probably feel like, I'm done anyway. It might as well be a life sentence. So what is there? Is this my life now? Just sitting here looking at these four walls? You don't have a lot to hope for. And when you take away hope, when you destroy hope, I think there was something to the old fable about, or story about Pandora's box, because when you take away hope, you could take away everything else. If a man has hope, he can hang on, even through the toughest, most dire circumstance. But if you take away hope, if you destroy hope, there's nothing left. Then it's just, everything's gone.
Let me ask you this. What's one of the worst things you ever seen in federal prison, man?
The murder of my friend, Eddie Wong.
And that happened in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to discuss that or not, but if you do, I'll ask you some questions. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
You and him were good friends, right? He had a lot of money. He was a gambling guy. And eventually the Aryan Brotherhood decide, hey, we're going to press up on this dude. And they kill him, right?
Yeah.
And you witness him get killed, don't you?
Right.
And you wanted to help him. Didn't you try to help him at first, and then they held you at knife point too?
Yeah, I intervened in the attack. He was a middle-aged businessman from Tampa, Florida, and I don't know what he was into as far as the gambling thing, but for some reason they believed him to have a lot of money. And back then, as it is now, even more so, part of the process of raising revenue for certain gangs was to step up, to identify a likely target, step up to them, and to just tell them, like they did him. They caught him like 10 o'clock that morning. We're on the fifth tier of the old ranges, like you see in the movies, just bars and narrow catwalks. It hadn't been renovated. We're way up at the top. It's the middle of the summer. And we're right in the middle of the range, too. The worst place we could probably be, but those were the only cells that were open. So we took them from A&O. And they went up to him, and they caught him in his cell. They just pushed him up against the back wall. They pulled out their knives, and they said, listen, this is the way it's going to be. You're going to send this amount of money to this address by this time next week, or guess what? We're coming back, and we're going to murder your ass. And he's like, well, I don't have money. well, you better find out how to get some, because if you don't, you're a dead man. And then, and they told him, look, if you don't believe us, we'll fucking butcher your ass right now, right here and now. And I can only imagine, because he was a little guy, and it was his first time ever in prison, Chinese guy, and he was really a smart guy and a funny guy, but I can only imagine the kind of fear he would have to have in his heart and mind right then, being backed up in those circumstances, in that place at that time. That was a dangerous fucking penitentiary, and they weren't playing. Obviously, they came back right after 4 o'clock down, for whatever reason. They came running back down the range, shirts out, long sleeves. They ran right by my cell. I'm putting on my shoes. So they turn and go into Eddie's cell. And I think that, because I hear a boom, 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 boom. You know what a cell's like. Boom, 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 boom. You hear banging lockers clanging around. And I thought they were, touching them up. So I jumped out there on the range, and one of the guys, there was 2 guys standing watch, one facing this way and one facing the other way. And the one facing my way pulled out a shank and, lightly stabbed me in the abdomen, just, touched me on the side. And when he did that, because he was trying to hit me, I just jumped back really fast. And so I went back in the cell, and, I grabbed my belt and my lock off. Because if there's, there was like 5 of them there. If there's 5 or 6 dudes, I mean, I didn't know how many were in the cell. So it was like, okay, let me get something here to equalize this thing a little bit. But when I went back out on the range, I started yelling, what the hell are you doing? Really loud, just to kind of spook them. And they all took off. They all started running down the other side of the range. And that's when Eddie came out, and he was stumbling. And he just fell against me like a drunken man. He just fell against me, and there was blood just squirting, the arterial spray coming out of the side of his neck. And it was just hitting me in the face. And he was like, John, help me, help me. So I put my arm around him. I said, man, we got to get you down to Flats, man. Just stay with me, man. We're going to get you to Flats. I stuck my thumb right inside his neck and, tried to do what I could. There was really not much that could be done because he was hit 13 different places, kidneys, heart, lungs. He took about 5 steps and then he passed out. So I picked him up, got him over my shoulder, and carried him down 5 flights of stairs to the Flats, and out at one of the guards. And we got him on a gurney, and me and 3 of the guards ran him over to the infirmary. So that was probably the worst day of my life, and in some ways it was also the best day of my life, because in retrospect, it was the kind of crisis that made me really sit up and take notice